So I think we'll just go ahead and get started. I want to welcome all of you to the webinar, Can Gamification Save Your Hospital? We're so glad that you're here today. We scheduled 1 hour for today's presentation, but we definitely want to get you out of here as quickly as possible because we know that you probably have a busy day lined up. Basically today we want to give you some ideas and insights around how you might use game mechanics and game psychology to optimize, engage, and improve the performance of your care teams. My name is Dina Ward and I'm a founding partner at Gear 5 Studio, and you can certainly learn more about our software and our gamified solutions at gear5studio.com. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. If you would like to ask a question at any time, you just need to type into the chat or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your dashboard. To minimize feedback today, we'll keep everyone's microphones muted and we'll answer questions at the end of the presentation. So let's jump right in. Our presenter today is Clint Carlos. He's a senior advisor at Gear 5 Studio and a former partner at Gallup in the business consulting division. While at Gallup, Clint worked with companies such as Procter & Gamble, Kraft Foods, TD Ameritrade, and many more, including a number of regional hospital networks. Clint used proven behavioral economic strategies with his clients to help them understand and influence human decision-making, which ultimately resulted in increased sales, reduced errors and safety incidents, and enhanced employee engagement. So Clint has a wealth of experience he's going to share with us today around optimizing teams and helping leaders such as you architect the structure that you need to turn your organization around from the inside out. So with that, I will welcome Clint and turn the mic over to him.
All right, thanks Dina. Appreciate the introduction and letting me join the webinar today and share a little bit about gamification. This is a really exciting, cutting-edge field that I think has unbelievable potential to really help organizations understand and influence the human behaviors that really drive their organizational performance. Today specifically, we're going to talk about hospitals, and one of the reasons that that is kind of the focus for our webinar today is just it seems that everywhere we go, we talk to hospital and healthcare leaders that are really focused on solving the complex problems that they face, which is really a combination of dynamics here in terms of a just lack of healthy behavior throughout the society that is overburdening a system, as well as the kind of unrequested regulations and limitations and things that have been really forced onto this industry. So this kind of unwelcome change in many regards is presenting quite a challenge for how hospitals continue to improve quality of care, patient experience, and other critical outcomes. So we're going to speak to that today, but we're going to kind of back up and really start with a big picture conversation on what the heck gamification is. Again, as Dina mentioned, everyone has been muted just so that there isn't a lot of background noise on this webinar. If you do have questions, there should be a text box. You can enter questions, and I see those pop up as I present, and I can get to those sometimes during the presentation, and others we'll kind of save for the end of the webinar. So again, thanks for joining, and don't hesitate to ask a question as they come up. So the agenda today is to start by talking about kind of this trend of gamification and putting a definition to that for you. Second, we're going to talk about how gamification can really be effective in influencing human behavior. And then third, we're going to talk about what really separates effective game design from all the other activity we see out there with people really attempting to create gamified experiences. And then last, we're going to come full circle and really talk about gamification in hospitals specifically. So thanks again for joining. So what is this thing that people are talking about? It's called gamification. Some people like to pronounce it gamification. I won't hold that against you if you decide to go that route. But But we're going to talk through a couple examples that I think will really help open our eyes to what gamification is. The definition that we would apply to it is that gamification is really the process of using game thinking and game mechanics to engage audiences and solve problems. In fact, in Gartner's research, they show that 70% of the global 2,000 organizations plan to use gamification solutions sometime by 2015, which is quickly approaching. Based on the prevalence of gamification and how widely used it's become in our society, from everything that we do in our lives, whether it's gamifying our consumer experiences, the way that parents use games to motivate children, gamification is everywhere. So if we think about the famous author William Shakespeare, and the way that he talked about how all the world is a stage, I would suggest that if he were living today, he would really change that phrase to say, all the world is a game. That's how widely used and embraced gamification has become. So the first example of gamification here is the first thing that most individuals see every day. It's their alarm clock. So this game is kind of an interesting app. It takes um, record of how often you as an individual wake up within 5 minutes of your alarm. You can see that this individual, and I'm not going to take credit for this. I think this was probably Dina's record. Only 54% of the time getting up out of bed within 5 minutes. Not bad. 201 times out of 366 attempts. You can see that there's some combo play at play here, 31 times, successfully waking up 2 days in a row. And that the average time it took, in this case, Dina to wake up was 3 minutes and 2 seconds. So pretty good all around. But that's kind of an interesting. So even very fundamental aspects of our daily lives that we wouldn't think about, people are finding ways to make that a social experience, and to really embed this psychology of recognition and instant gratification, which keeps us on the path to good behaviors. The next one is one that I think we're all familiar with, and that's really the use of gamification and loyalty programs. Now, this is one of the longer tenured programs that we see in gamification. Again, yet another useless loyalty program. So they're everywhere. I don't know how many cards I've got in my wallet. I've got so many cards I had to open a couple extra wallets that I just keep in my briefcase to store all these loyalty programs. But what's really fascinating about the loyalty program, and we're going to touch on this subject again in a little bit, is that customers really don't participate because of the tangible or monetary rewards that they receive. For loyalty program members, especially frequent flyers, the real incentive to participate is status. So keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to talk about the importance of status when it comes to gamification. But just imagine, the people that you know that are diehard Mileage Plus members for United. How likely are they to book a flight on Southwest if they feel like their status is at jeopardy towards the end of the year? In fact, studies have shown that individuals will actually go out and personally pay for additional flights for last minute trips towards the end of the year just to maintain status with some of these airlines. And again, the tangible benefits are hard to even identify, and you might say non-existent, but that status remains really important in the mind of game players, which are the consumers here. The next example, and this is where I get really excited, but when you start to see gamification used to do social good, and in this example, Earth Echo International is an ocean conservation group, and what they've done is they've allowed individuals to participate in this underwater world game, where as people put in money to play the game and accomplish things in the game, that is a trigger for donations to the ocean conservation. And so again, we see that gamification is so compelling to users and players that the flow of monetary rewards is rarely from the system to me as a player, but it's typically from me to the player into the system to continue to participate in that kind of engaging game experience. Here's an example that's a little bit closer to home for most folks in healthcare. This is an app that the U.S. Health and Human Services Department actually commissioned a group to make. We've built a number of similar virtual world training environments to this. But in this case, this was to help provide a fun, engaging way for people to really learn and master the HIPAA regulations and understand healthcare information privacy. So in this case, you can see they took old stale content that might have been, a manual that people would be asked to read, and they tried to make it come alive and really leverage the psychology of gamification to increase the likelihood that people will quickly learn and master this kind of content. So here we've got a physician. He gets a call from another physician who wants him to email Mr. Lee's lab results to the personal email account. And he's going to be accessing this through a hotel computer, and he's leaving the conference now, and wants to meet the patient at the emergency room. So there's a bit of urgency here. What should I do as a physician that gets that request? Well, as you can see here, we've got a few options on the right. You can reassure him that the email is that you'll email it right away before you forget. After all, he is a trusted colleague. The second option is to take a step back, determine if he has access to encrypted email, and if not, request that your office securely fax the results to the hospital labeled to his attention. The third option would be to, knowing that he has a personal email account with a password, agree to send the results, and it'll be safe enough, and you know him pretty well. The last option is to go ahead and send the results, but don't tell anyone. Chances are nothing bad will happen. So I think we all know that the second option there was correct, but you can see that through repetition and making this fun, you see there's a score there. As you answer it correctly, you get points, and you can navigate through the hospital and engage in conversations around healthcare information privacy and practice the skill of complying with those stipulations. So we're going to talk about it. One of the really interesting phenomena around gamification. These are two of the most popular games to have hit the world stage. On the left, we've got Angry Birds. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And on the right, we've got Farmville. And obviously, these are hugely successful simply because we've got a world full of ornithologists and swine enthusiasts and tons of people who are really impassioned about their focus on fertilizer technique and agriculture. Now, obviously, I'm kidding. There really are very few people who are ornithologists or swine enthusiasts. And in the real world, there are only 2 million farmers. But Farmville attracted 80 million active users to the system, and Angry Birds was an equal success, releasing several iterations of this game and getting millions of people to pay for that game and to invest countless millions of hours playing this game, trying to knock these pigs off of these stations. What's really fascinating about this, and the lesson we can take away, is that the theme of the game or the subject matter really has very little correlation with how effective that game is at drawing people in and engaging them to really play and participate. So this speaks to the idea that great game design really trumps everything else. Subject matter is irrelevant. If Zynga was effective in getting 80 million people to log into Facebook or a mobile app every day and play this Farmville app and cultivate their crops, um, couldn't we also use similar mechanics and techniques to get people as passionate about things like saving lives in hospital where the stakes are so much higher? One thing I found really interesting in speaking to some of the senior execs at Zynga is that their model is a freemium model. Most people do it for free, but there are a lot of people out there that are spending upwards of $1,000 or more a month to buy virtual goods in Farmville. They're buying land, they're buying seed, they're buying fertilizer, they're buying equipment. And these things don't exist in the real world. They're paying, out of their personal pocketbook to be able to increase or improve the resources on their farm, just to really maintain some level of status. And there again, we see that the psychology of gamification is really about status and progress. So we're going to talk about some of these game mechanics and why they're so powerful. But I thought those were a couple of good examples. Here are another couple of examples. On the left, we see a screenshot from the popular app Foursquare. Here, we've got millions of people have downloaded a location-based app on their mobile device. They can go to any one of many local locations, destinations, restaurants, nightclubs, schools, art centers, and check in there. When they check in, they start to accumulate points throughout the day for that check-in. Um, Here you can see that this individual has received a number of badges down below. Some of the trophies represent how often they've checked in. So you get these things the first 10, 25, 50 check-ins that you do. The one with the little smiley face and some bubbles is called the Crunked badge, which means that this player had checked into enough bars over the course of a certain time period to where they were awarded the Crunked badge. You can see that they've got a number of other badges, a birthday badge. The crown there is a mayor badge. So a lot of people try to go out and accumulate mayorships over as many locations as they can, which is kind of like playing Monopoly. These people are accumulating property, which they don't own, but since they check in there the most, they're the mayor. And so, with no tangible or monetary rewards here, these people are willingly sharing their location and check in with people on Foursquare. In this example, this individual just unlocked the barista badge by visiting Starbucks at 5 different locations. And again, they don't receive a coupon to go get a Starbucks. They just are reminded, hey, buy an extra one for your friend. So when you think about rewards and gamification, we see this theme that money is flowing into the game and not out of the game, and that the rewards are mostly psychological in nature. On the right, this even amplifies this example. So what we see is that Farmville was such a compelling incentive that 7-Eleven ran a promotion where if you bought a big gulp, you got credits on Farmville. So again, spending money in the real world resulted in recognition flowing into the game. So just a fascinating example of how motivated humans have become to really participate in these games. The last example I'm going to share is about the X Prize Foundation. And this is a group that in 2004 put a prize out there to the world, $10 million dollars for the first organization to get 2 manned private spaceships into outer space within a short period of time. What happened was a number of people signed up. 5 groups actually committed to competing and heavily investing in the process. A couple of them dropped out. The winner was actually a group funded by Paul Allen, the Microsoft founding billionaire, who had already long before the X Prize decided to do this and built a team and funded it to the tune of $50 million. So his team spent $50 million competing, and they won. So they won the $10 million prize. But as you can see, while they may have gained some technology, they weren't really the winner in that equation. So if they weren't the winner and others weren't the winner, it asks the question, who really won when it came to the X Prize? And I think the answer is the X Prize Foundation won. Today, everyone in the world that is connected to broadband internet has heard of the X Prize. It's gone on for multiple subsequent competitions. The current one is the first private ship to go to the moon, the Lunar X Prize, which is sponsored by Google and NASA. And so the X Prize really was the winner of this competition. And the lesson learned there is that when it comes to games, they favor their creators. So the house always wins. And I think that's a really important message when we think about building games for enterprises and thinking about how you can leverage that architecture and that advantage to really drive great change in those organizations and deliver the types of behaviors that mean so much to those organizations and their stakeholders, especially in hospitals. The odds are in your favor that if you design that game, you can really manipulate the behaviors to reach the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. So, just to reiterate some of the lessons that we've learned, I think, by reviewing some of the prevalent gamification trends out there. One is that there really is no correlation between the theme or subject matter of a game and fun. So if pigs and birds can be fun, couldn't nursing and serving patients be fun? Games can be the precipice where fun and work meet. That's a pretty interesting opportunity there. Third, the new status. So the new version of gold is status. It's more valued than monetary rewards or other currency. Fourth, the gamification feedback loop is really our guide to great game design. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. But one thing that each of these effective, highly adopted viral games have in common is that they took a scientific approach to user and participant feedback, where that really guided the architecture and design of subsequent iterations of the games. The next point that we learned here is that fun is a new metric. It's not about how many hours you spend in a game, how much money you spend in the game, but it's really about this overall dynamic of fun, because fun is the piece that keeps people coming back. It keeps people engaged in the right activities to reach the right outcomes. Without fun, the whole thing breaks down. So, again, great game design has to be fun. If it's not fun, it doesn't work. And then last, as we saw with the X Prize, games favor their creators. So this is a really compelling opportunity for people who are looking at and interested in becoming the creators of their game. So what does this have to do with human performance? We talked earlier about how this is about helping hospitals become greater than they are today and solve some of the complex challenges. So we're going to talk about that. One of my favorite books from kind of this new discipline of behavioral economics is called Thinking Fast and Slow by Danny Kahneman, who is a winner of the Nobel Prize. What he found is that 70% of all human decisions are made by our default thinking system, which he called System 1. It's fast, intuitive, and emotional. The problem with most organizations, and particularly in hospitals, we see that management energy ignores this fact and assumes that people act according to our slower, more deliberative, and logical process, which Kahneman calls System 2. So, behavioral economics really challenges the central premise of classical economic theory that individuals will always work rationally to achieve the best possible outcomes. I think, as we saw in those gamification examples, that that instinctive, natural need for the psychological rewards of gamification will be a much better guide of what will sustain and drive human behavior than rational thinking. So again, we're talking about getting people, nurses, health unit coordinators, therapists, physicians, to basically do things in a predictable way that is not forced and potentially against their interest, but is in the best interest of patients and of the organization. And that is where games reside. That's where games really have their power. Let's talk about why games are so meaningful. And we're gonna first start with kind of the anatomy of the brain. When we're born, our brains have about 100 billion neurons. That's roughly equivalent to the number of stars in the Milky Way. And our mind, what we consider our mind, our conscious mind, really exists in the connections between the cells and synapses. Over 15 years of our early development, these synaptic connections are formed by sending out thousands of signals every day, trying to make a connection to those other neurons. By the time we're 3 years old, there are up to 15,000 connections for each neuron, which is a massive overload. That's why we get major emotional swings. Certainly, there's a lot of hormones at play and other medical reasons, but it's a fascinating part of our development. Then, over the subsequent 10 years, the stronger connections, the ones that we go back to and use over and over again, our default mechanism for reacting to the environment that we are living in, those get stronger. The ones that we don't use become weaker and wither away. So the roads of the most traffic in our minds are widened. And this combines with genetics and environment to really determine, by the time we're roughly 15 years old, who we are. The physical construction is complete. The mental pathways are the filter to our behavior. And so when you think about what gets us really enthusiastic, what creates differences in personality, and what those recurring patterns of behavior are, they're already observable at that age. And so what we're saying is that the deep embedded psychology of who we are is so strongly constructed and fortified within our minds that the best opportunity for organizations to really influence human behavior is to tap into that natural instinct and fuel the behaviors they want through that river of consciousness rather than trying to fight and swim upstream. This was a pretty fascinating study that Gallup performed with some partners. They took a look at a number of folks by using an fMRI machine and evaluating their brain as they made consumer-based decisions. And what they found is that when organizations had a strong brand that connected to those individuals, it lighted up in the areas of the brain that different that is associated with highly emotional interactions, emotions such as love and hate. And so, again, that reinforces this Kahneman discovery that decisions and behavior is rooted in emotion and instinct, not in this kind of academic, logical approach to the world around us. So, system one thinking hardwired into our brains, nearly impossible to change. To influence behavior, this is what Zynga executive will tell you. Um, the key is to discover and apply the right mix of behavioral compulsions. So when I heard that firsthand out of this Zynga executive's mouth, I translate it to really saying it's a systematic approach to addicting people to the right behaviors rather than the wrong behaviors. For Zynga, the behaviors that they wanted to addict people to were spending a lot of time in the game, spending a lot of money in the game, increasing their status, increasing their rewards. As parents say, it's easier said than done. If only I could addict my kids to the right behaviors as easily as Zynga has addicted people to Farmville. So let's talk about game mechanics. Now that we know a little bit about how human behavior is influenced, uh, you can see that some of the tested game mechanics that have been widely applied and have been proven to be effective really tap into those kind of instinctive aspects of our consciousness. Things like achievements. You've got people that are just really driven to achieve. Then you've got people that are really drawn to epic meaning, right? Something bigger than them, something greater. There's a Lord of the Rings type adventure ahead of them, where they need to feel like they're solving the world's problems. Um, Infinite gameplay is a game mechanic that basically just provides a pathway for people to continue to engage in the game with a sense of never ending opportunity and never ending achievement. So I don't know how many people played Simon's Quest on a video game back in the 80s, but that was one I felt like was going to go on forever. We finally reached the end, and then they introduced another second game. But that's kind of how that component works. Virality is another game mechanic that's really compelling in terms of engaging people to come back and play. Status, we've talked about. Points, quests, community collaboration is another one. These are really important because when we've introduced psychologists into the world of gaming, uh, even beginning with Robert Bartle back in the '90s, he started to really assess what it was in the psychology of players that drove them, compelled them to continue playing in whatever game he was observing them. What he found is that if you really bucket these players into four categories, it's a pretty consistent ability to kind of see where the motivation lies. In the first group, called that he labeled achievers, these are the people that are just relentlessly driven to do more, accomplish more, uh, and maximize their opportunity. The second group is socializers. These are people who seek that fun, that entertainment, that interaction with others, that collaboration. They want to do things in the game because then that connects them with other people who play the game, and then they can have a social connection. The third group is explorers, and these are the people that love that epic meaning. They love that infinite gameplay because they're out there, on Legends of Zelda, exploring every corner of the map, whether or not that gets them to the next level, just because they want to find that secret passageway or that extra tool that nobody else found, or that bonus point. Or whatever that may be. And the last group is a group I probably really associate myself with the most, and that's the killers. These are the really competitive people that just want to win. And so that drive to win, to beat other people, is really what drives killers. And so if you think back to those game mechanics, there are some game mechanics that are highly effective with killers and not as effective with achievers. Another game mechanics that are really effective with socializers, but maybe not so effective with explorers. And so the key is, as my friend at Zynga would say, is to find the right mix of behavioral compulsions for each player to really optimize their psychological ownership of the game. And again, you could point to some new categories that have been developed, maybe subcategories within each of these. But this is kind of the basic way that, as game designers, we look at player personas. So, how do we leverage that information and that insight to really create great games? And I'm going to use that term sparingly. I think there's a lot of games out there. We showed some were effective, some weren't very effective, but great games are different because people can't stop playing them, and it's the people that we want to play them. Well, the process really is rooted in a science that we call validated learning. Validated learning is the practice of effectively measuring the accuracy of our assumptions and using the results of the validation to understand whether our assumption was correct, and if so, continue on to the next test. Or if not, decide whether our assumption or feature needs to be improved or to change direction. At Zynga, the way that this plays out is they've got teams of hundreds of people that work on each of the games, and every single day they're rolling out dozens of new features, navigation components, different game assumptions, game mechanics, and then they're testing those in hundreds of cohorts in real time, and whichever components or features lend themselves to increased engagement in the game, as validated through the data feedback loop or the gamification feedback loop that we mentioned earlier. Those features stay and the other features drop off. And so the game continues to evolve with time and improve in its ability to drive those behavioral compulsions. So we follow a very similar technique at Gear 5 Studio when we think about great game design. It's really not just an art, which certainly is part of it, and that's the graphic design, the great user flow, the great experience, and the art of attaching meaning to the game. But then the science is really in that gamification feedback loop, where it's a big data major analytics play to acutely identify the various features and assumptions that need to be enhanced to increase engagement in the game. So that's how that happens. As you can tell, it takes a lot of science and rigor to be able to really master that, and that's kind of the secret sauce. So what is the potential for gamification within hospitals? I want to try to kind of wrap this up in the next few minutes. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and we'll certainly get to those in a minute. For gamification within hospitals, I wanted to just start out by playing a little video that our friends at Gear 5 Studio created.
Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, hospitals are under immense pressure to improve quality of care.
All right. It sounds like we may have. Hopefully, you were able to see that, and that was helpful for you. If for whatever reason it didn't come through right, we'll send the link out afterwards, and you can always take a look. It's available on YouTube. Uh, so, yeah, I'm going to give you just a quick sneak peek on what the team at Gear 5 are working on for hospitals specifically. This is the Amped Medical Edition for hospitals. So Amped is a performance platform that Gear 5 Studio has implemented. It's available for all industries, all organizations of all size. And what it is a one-stop place for organizations to aggregate their performance data, whatever performance data is important to their employees, and easily gamify that performance information in real time. As you can see here, the platform has a number of social cues and rewards and recognition components built in, some status features with badging and levels. And then one of the most important features is that it provides the opportunity for an organization to look at really diverse sets of performance metrics on one level playing field. So in this case, and this is just a mock-up of some of the early renderings of the medical edition, where we've got some of the quality of care metrics, SCIP, AMI, and the behaviors associated with those aspects of care placed on the same palette as the HCAHPS patient experience data, as that has been aggregated here in this example, as well as what they call participation, which is kind of overall corporate citizenship. So, are they living up to kind of the organizational brand promise, the what's expected in terms of proactive contribution? But by putting this in one place and allowing people to compare, one metric to another, it really helps provide clarity and transparency for an individual employee to understand at any given moment, how am I performing in my role. One of the biggest challenges that organizations face, but particularly in hospitals, is that there's a lot of ambiguity. So if I'm a nurse in this case, Mary Grace Whitman, and I'm in Norfolk, Nebraska, how do I really know at the end of the day what's the most important thing that I'm focused on? I talk to my leaders every day about HCAHPS, about quality of care, about some of the administrative components of my job. Um, but what really matters at the end of the day? Well, this helps to answer that question. So what we do is we go through with healthcare leaders and help identify and put some science behind weighting each of the performance outcomes and providing those on one consistent scorecard that is richly dynamic and changes every day. As a nurse, Mary goes into the system. She can view her scores. She can see how she's doing in each area. She can add a little bit of information about herself. She can share some of her performance data to friends on the network and do things like that to help make it really engaging. Um, there's also roll up dashboards and snapshots so that managers and leaders throughout the organization can see the performance of teams and divisions or job families within the organization. So the information is transparent, real time, and it enhances and improves accountability at all levels of the organization. And you can see that by putting in some really simple game mechanics here, we're just starting to tap into those real deep psychological motivating factors to really enhance performance. Part of it is knowing what's expected. And so this helps answer that question. And then the second piece is providing the tools and resources to help make the changes in terms of human behavior that need to happen. So that's kind of a sneak peek at Amped. One of the really interesting components of Amped, other than kind of those aspects that we've talked about, is the way that this platform integrates with mobile, web, and EMR systems to bring the conversation off of the dashboard into the day-to-day lives of each of these employees. We call these behavioral prompts or behavioral cues that surface up and provide either recognition or reminders and interaction for those employees. The great thing about that is that this then becomes seamlessly integrated into my life as a nurse every day. So Mary Grace in that example, when she's in an exam room and logs in to the healthcare IT system that the hospital has, may have a layer of prompts or messages that come up and show when she's received badges and recognition, or might even be reminded of certain behaviors that she has individually exhibited a priority for in the system, or perhaps has shown that she hasn't performed as well in certain areas. And so she'll be uh, receive individualized coaching through the system in kind of a smart way. And so the system really is designed to learn what's most important and timely for each of the employees that interact with it, and then provide that level of instant kind of feedback. So that's a really powerful component. We certainly didn't have time today to showcase the whole AMPed platform, but that's definitely something that I know that the team at Gear 5 would love to do as a follow up. So when we think about next steps, how if I'm a hospital and I really care about improving quality of care or HCAPS, patient satisfaction, patient experience, and other performance measures, the first step would be to request the white paper that Gear 5 has put together on this topic specifically for hospitals. Then the next step is to participate in a promotion that Gear 5 is running. They are asking for applications from hospitals all across the US, and a few select hospitals will be awarded a fees waived opportunity to receive a performance audit, which will assess the readiness and fit for a gamified performance solution in the hospital. And then the third piece obviously would be to get started with speccing some of the custom integration pieces of the AMP platform. So the team is really excited about this. There are a couple of pioneer hospitals out there that are moving forward full speed ahead with this platform. We're really excited to see how it comes to life. And the North Star for the development of this program is really going to be, is this system fun? Does it get to the outcomes that matter? And it's going to be based on the lessons learned through gamification we've talked about today. So with that said, we've got just a couple of minutes here left for Q&A. And I'm also going to send a link to that video as a follow-up, which might be another good next step for those of you who didn't have access to today. So uh, thanks again for participating. If you have questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box. I do have a couple of questions here in the chat box. Let me just make sure that I'm reading these right, and I'll get to those here in just a second. So the first question is, what other industries can AMPed be used for? I'm summarizing, sorry, as I go. So really, when you think about how AMPed could work, what we've found is that the organizations that are really most drawn to a gamified performance platform are organizations that come from industries that have relied on a certain set of human behaviors for decades and are now asked to make significant changes that are mission critical to their business. So anytime you've got to change human behavior in an existing environment, the power to disrupt the status quo with new activities, new conversations, new learning, new prompts, a new system like this that integrates into your day-to-day business, that's where the money is. So one of those industries that we've identified and have begun working with clients in is in banking. So we're pretty excited about what this could do for retail banks in terms of optimizing the experience despite a lot of some of the Reg E components of the Dodd-Frank legislation that came out. Obviously healthcare because of the Affordable Care Act changes that have come out, and A lot of the changes even that resulted in some of the meaningful use spend where hospitals all converted to the EMR systems. So those are probably the two biggest priorities we see. The third one we look at is in public education. We think there's a huge opportunity to really change the way that students and teachers are motivated, but AMP could be really effective in motivating and managing teaching populations. So that's kind of interesting to us. Okay, let's see. I think we got to that question already. I'm going to switch this over to this is a website for Gear 5 Studio for anyone who wants to go check that out. Info at Gear 5 Studio would be the email address for questions to get to. And also, as you exit the webinar, you're going to be asked to respond to a survey. I'd love your feedback. Just kind of ask for your feedback on the presentation today, as well as your overall reaction to the content. So please do that. There's also a question there where you can make the request to receive that white paper.